Hello.
Hello, Brian.
Yeah, Larry, I just made you a co-host just in case. I had to restart my computer. I've been using Zoom all day since 9 o'clock this morning, and it decided to crash on me 5 minutes ago.
Typical computer.
So in case something happens, I can quickly log in on my other laptop.
Okay, sure.
But the meeting will keep going with you as co-host.
Okay, that's dangerous. Thanks for the form there. I got the 702s and 797s filled in and sent out to them to start this year's. So.
Okay, so that spreadsheet version
works perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they must have made a slight change, like to have a difference between 32 and 64-bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there is some programs that will only work in one or the other, so, but I never remember which one I've got. So.
Yeah, we'll just wait a few more minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it looks like we have Leona from 691. Oh, Tara, you're back again from 34. And which squadron is it Tina or Ron that we have online?
Hi, it's Tina, and we're 365 Kindersley.
Okay. Yeah, Tara is a sucker for punishment.
Yeah.
He's come back a second time to listen to me.
Well, we went through a lot, so it was good. Richard said he's going to try and connect on tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I thought Dave indicated he was going to try to come on.
Yeah.
I'll just wait till 5 after, then we'll get started. Now for Leona and Tina, are you both the treasurers for your squadrons, or do you have another executive role?
Hi, it's Leona. I am the treasurer.
How long have you been treasurer for?
I'm going to say this is my 5th year.
Oh, so you're a seasoned pro at this.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, it's been great.
I'm the secretary, but I am also co-treasurer, and basically I just don't do a lot of the treasurer stuff. I just try to make sure I get the ACC 9 done, and
Okay.
The other co-treasurer does pretty much everything else.
Okay. Oh, that's a good arrangement. You come to the meeting and you tell her what to do. Okay, it looks like that's all. This is all we're going to have for tonight, so we might as well get started. Thank you for coming out tonight. This is where this hopefully is going to be the first of several sessions. I'm going to probably have these type of sessions once every month or two, probably once a month for the first 2 or 3 months until we start getting things caught up on a few different projects. So tonight I'm just going to be mainly talking about the type of work that you as a treasurer or the treasurer normally has to do within the squadron. Because like I've been the provincial treasurer, I believe this is going into my 3rd year now.
Yep.
It's amazing how time flies. But one of the things I noticed is a lot of squadrons get themselves into trouble, probably through no fault of their own. It's just they don't know about all the various reporting that has to be done. And there's a lot of instances where squadrons are struck off some registry, or they lose their charity license, or or other things that can have a big impact on the squadron finances and its legal structure, actually. And a lot of it has to do with the nature of our squadrons. Every year we may have a new executive coming in as the existing parents leave, or as their children's quits cadets or graduates from cadets. And sometimes there isn't that natural flow of information from the one executive to the new executive on exactly what needs to be done. And things can get left out. And for tonight, one of the things I want to do is talk about the paperwork that's required. And then second, I want to go through the new ACC 9 form, just to give an outlook of what it looks like. Now, you don't need to use this form for this year's ACC 9 that's due right now, but National would want you to use this form going forward for the ACC 9 for the current year, which will be due a year from now. So I'll start off with the role of treasurer. And this will be more for the benefit of those of you who might be new to the role. As a treasurer, there's actually a lot of responsibilities that's laid upon you. There's quite a few different reporting forms that you need to be aware of. And the starting form is the ACC 9. This essentially is a National Air Cadet League required form. They ask all the squadrons to complete it. They have to submit it to the provincial level, and then we at the provincial level then forward it to the National Air Cadet League. And they use it to monitor the health of all the squadrons across the country. So when it comes to the ACC 9, this is where you have a few different options. The first thing you need to do to complete the ACC 9 is you need to do bookkeeping. And this is where you have two choices. You could either use the ACC 9 form itself to do the bookkeeping, and there is a basic bookkeeping aspect to the spreadsheet itself. Or if you wanted to, and I know there's several squadrons to do this, they use some other accounting program to keep track of their bookkeeping, and then they just transfer the information into the ACC 9 at the end of the year. This is where you have the option of doing both, or doing, well, you wouldn't do both at the same time, but you could do one or the other. It's kind of up to your discretion. Like, now you might ask, well, what's the pros and cons of doing bookkeeping in another system? Well, I know one thing, I was the treasurer for 41 for 3 years until I became the chair. And this, one of the issues I quickly came across was my previous predecessors at 41, the treasurers. That's where they each used their own different program. One treasurer did it on a spreadsheet. The treasurer after that then did it in Simply Accounting in a professional business version. And then the treasurer after that, who was right before me, she did it for 2 years. The first year she used a student version of Simply Accounting. And then the second year, I guess she was no longer a student, so she used a spreadsheet. So trying to go back and gather information over multiple years was difficult because there was 4 different types of accounting systems being used. Now at the time, that's where well, to let you know, I'm a tax accountant and bookkeeper myself. I have a public practice, so I use QuickBooks Online in my professional business. So I just set up 41 with an online QuickBooks version, and we've been using that for the last 4 years, and it's been working smoothly. Now, the reason we went that route is our CO wanted to be able to get access to the books just so he knows where the squadron was. And at the time when I was treasurer, our chairperson was also interested in that information. So I was able to do that. So that's one reason why we went with an external accounting system. Also, it doesn't hurt when I basically get I was able to get it for $1 a month, which you normally can't get it for that price. It's like something like online QuickBooks for a nonprofit, I think is more like $10 to $20 a month right now. Now, this is where with the ACC 9 form, you don't actually need a bookkeeping system. You can actually use the ACC 9 program to do bookkeeping, which you'll soon see when I go through the ACC 9 program. So that's the first step you need to do. You need to maintain a set of books. Once you do that, then you have to complete the ACC 9 form. And an advantage of using the ACC 9 spreadsheet to do your bookkeeping is that it basically creates the forms that you need automatically. You're pretty well done. You just do the bookkeeping and you're done. If you use an external program, you then have to transfer the information into the ACC 9. Now, I know for one or more of you, you use an external accountant to put together your financial statements. And again, that's fine. Just be prepared that your ACC 9 may not match up 100% with your reviewed or audited financial statements that a professional accountant uses. And that's like one of the big differences you'll find is typically most accountant prepared financial statements actually list a value for assets. In the case of the ACC 9, it assumes you're on cash accounting and that basically assets are written off as a straight cash expense every year. And it only assigns a value of $1 to all your different asset classes. So you will see some difference. But don't worry. It's not because your accountant is doing a bad job. He's just following standard accounting rules. Whereas the Air Cadet League, they kind of have a different set of accounting rules they want followed. And it's more based on cash accounting. Whereas accountants, we like to use accrual accounting rules more specifically. So that's the ACC 9 form. Normally the form is due at the end of October by our AGM meeting. This year, I've been kind of very lenient with that deadline, considering that a lot of our squadrons weren't even fully operating by the end of October. And now we're back in stand down mode again for who knows how long. And we realized that, yeah, there are some squadrons that are having difficulties with their executive, just even getting an executive in place. So we've been giving a little bit extra time, but we will need to get these ACC 9s in probably by the end of January, or else I'm going to start getting some nasty emails from National wondering why we don't have our ACC 9s in yet. So this is where that's your first priority, is getting that ACC 9 form done. And the reason why that should be your first priority is because then after that, there's additional steps you may need to take. The next step is if you're in an incorporated squadron, which about 2/3 of our squadrons are, this is where you need to submit an annual return to corporations branch, along with a copy of your financial statements. So this is where the ACC 9 would be a good basis to help prepare those financial statements. Now, in the case of corporations branch, there's different set of rules depending on the size of your revenue base for your squadron. If you have 25,000 or less in revenue, you can actually waive the requirement to have a review or audit completed. You can just go with what's called a compilation agreement. In Saskatchewan, or across Canada, actually, there's 3 levels of assurance. There's a compilation, review, and audit. Compilation is the simplest. The review is kind of moderate level, and the audit is the most intensive. It's also the most expensive too to get done. So this is where if you're under $25,000 in revenue, total revenue from the previous fiscal year, you can actually get your not your executive, but your parent committee as a whole. If the majority of them vote in agreement, they can waive a review or audit. And that could save $1,000 to $2,000 in accounting fees each year. If you're over 25,000 and under 250,000, this is where most of squadrons, some of them are over 25, but we don't have any over 250. That's where normally you're required to do an audit, but you can then have your parent committee vote to waive the audit and just go with the review. But you have to get a review done at minimum. So this is where normally this statement, depending on your year, depending on the requirements of corporations branch, most squadrons have to get this in between January or possibly end of February. So you do need to get your papers into the accountant to get the review and audit done. Now, one thing I'm going to mention, in the past, the corporations branch would allow a non-accountant to actually do a corporations branch had to approve that person. So you had to send them a letter saying who they are and their background and experience. But basically bookkeepers who had no accounting designation could do a review in corporations branch's eyes. By about, let's see, how long has it been now? I believe it's 5 years or 6 years. That changed with the passage of the Accounting Act. That's when they took all three of the accounting associations and merged them into one called CPA Canada. And with that in Saskatchewan, this is where now only a licensed CPA firm is allowed to do a review or audit in the province of Saskatchewan. And not all CPA firms are licensed. Like, for example, like I'm a public CPA firm, but I'm not licensed to do reviews and audits. I can do compilations and I can do tax returns, but I can't do a review or an audit.
Your camera's froze again.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, just give me a minute here.
It's been for a little while. I wasn't worried. I thought it might click back.
I thought I fixed this problem. Good thing I made you the host. I'm going to just switch to my other computer here. If I can find my email here with the link. Okay, Larry, you may have to admit me.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. See it. Okay. There. I clicked. There you are.
Okay, I'm back in. And then if you want to click on my second name that just showed up on the participant list, like when you
Host. No, you're only on here once.
I'm only on once?
Yeah.
Well, let me just check here.
Tina, Tara, Iona, Brian. Oh, no, there you are. Okay. You want me to mute?
No, not mute, just click on more.
Okay.
And then That's where you should be able to make me a host or co-host.
No, I just. No, it only off stop video or spotlight. Well, that's all the wrong one. Okay, this one. Stop video. It's stop video, spotlight, allow to record, allow to multi-pin, rename, put in waiting room.
Are you in the participant list?
Yeah,
And if you point to my name, it says more.
yeah.
And you click on it, it doesn't say allow to make me a host.
No, allow to record, allow to multi-pin.
Oh, okay.
Just wait, there's got to be participants. You're a host now. Okay, no. Participants. Try again. Brian. Cool. Now I can. Okay. Okay, now you are again.
Okay. Yeah, I just started unfroze on mine here. Uh, yeah, it's not. Okay. I just want to shut it down on this other computer here so I don't create too much noise. Okay. So you can hear me fine?
Yep.
Okay, so this is where I was just talking like about the compilations, reviews, and audits. You need to be careful. If you talk to corporations branch, they don't really want to get into this debate about who can do a review or audit. And it's partially because the government never updated the Corporations Act. So it's kind of, we have a conflict between the two acts right now. The government is talking about formally fixing it, but COVID probably kind of put a delay on things. They're more concerned about other legislation at the moment. But all I say is basically, if you're above $25,000 in sales, more than likely you at least need a review at you need a review at the minimum, and technically you should be getting a CPA accountant who's licensed to do reviews, to do it for you. So that's the next form that you have to complete. And this is a form where a lot of squadrons have got themselves into trouble because either they forgot or they didn't realize that there is this requirement to file an annual return with corporations branch. And what happens is after a couple of months after you don't file, they usually send you a warning letter, and then the month after that, they strike you off the corporate registry. Some people say, well, I'll just keep going. What do I need this for? Well, legally, if you're struck off the corporate registry, your squadron or your corporation is not allowed to be doing business in Saskatchewan, technically according to the law. So this is where normally it's a bad thing to get struck off. And this is where if your squadron is incorporated, and we do have about probably around 8 squadrons or so that have been incorporated but are currently struck off the list. This is where it's going to be important to get reactivated. In most cases, it's just a matter of filing the missing financial statements for the years since they got struck off. But we do have a few squadrons that were struck off, say, 10 years ago, and they just never bothered renewing at all or didn't even know about it. That's where, in that case, we're going to have to take a look at that situation. And it might be better just to form a new corporation and start from scratch rather than trying to put together 10 years of financial statements. Then finally, we have the batch of squadrons who are not set up as a nonprofit corporation. And one of the things we had to agree with CRA is we have to get all our squadrons incorporated so that they're all consistent with each other. over the last 40, or how many years has Air Cadets been around? Probably 70 years, 75 years or so. There's been a lot of differences in how squadrons organize themselves. They probably all start off as just as a nonprofit organization, and then many of them incorporated over the years. And it's like this all across Canada, not just Saskatchewan. And CRA, they started looking at this and they weren't happy. They thought, this is too confusing. We've got too many differences between provinces and within a province. We want all the squadrons to get uniform in how they're set up. And in Saskatchewan, that's where we decided, okay, all squadrons are going to have to incorporate. So if your squadron is not incorporated, this is where we'll need to work together over the next few months to get you into the through the corporation process. It's a fairly straightforward process. The key thing is we need to get probably 3 to 5 parents willing to sign up as the initial directors for it. And I know there's a couple of squadrons where that could be a challenge. They're having a hard time just getting the core executive in place, let alone trying to get 5 parents to sign up as directors. And they can't be officers. Your officers for the squadron, like I'm talking the D&D officers, they are not allowed to be involved with the parent committee as a director. They've got that mandate from their side of the Air Cadet program. So this is something to think about if you're not incorporated. Okay, actually, I know 691 and 34, you're incorporated. Tina, do you know, are you incorporated or not?
Yeah, yes, we are.
Okay, so the key thing is you just need to make sure you do your annual return every year to make sure you stay incorporated.
Yeah, one of our officers is a lawyer and he kind of takes care of that for us.
Okay, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it had lapsed for a number of years. And then, like you said, it was easier to reincorporate than to try to figure out all the financials for that number of years. So
Yes.
we reincorporated about 4 years ago.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the issues that I was referring to at the beginning, where when we have a sometimes completely different people in charge of the executive from year to year, it's easy to forget about some of these forms, especially if the person who's stepping into the role of treasurer has never encountered these forms before. So that's the corporation form. Again, that's probably due January, possibly February, depending on the date. Now, this is where, when you incorporate, this is where we're basically classified as a nonprofit charity corporation. There's 2 types of corporations within Saskatchewan. There's a charity base and a membership base. And because the majority of our squadrons raise money from the public, like through fundraising activities, we're classified as the charity type of nonprofit in Saskatchewan. The key thing to remember, though, is just because we're classified as a charity in Saskatchewan, that does not give us charitable status to issue tax-deductible charity receipts. That's done at the CRA level. And that's the next question that your squadron will need to ask itself. Once you're incorporated, then do you want to be able to issue donation receipts? And if the answer to that is yes, you then need to register with CRA as a registered charity. And then you will be able to issue donation receipts. And this is where definitely contact me if that's something you're interested in doing. This is the branch where that created the most issues for us with CRA. It was the charity group. Now, about a third of our squadrons have already done some reorganization last spring. And this is where we also have a lot of squadrons that used to have a charity number, but it got lapsed or canceled on them because they never filed the charity return every year. So that's the next form. If you get registered as a charity, there is a T3010 form that's required to be submitted every year. And this is where in the new ACC9 form, it actually creates a template for you with all the necessary numbers to transfer into the official CRA form. But it is something that needs to be done. So this is where, again, if you're interested, contact me. The National League has negotiated with CRA on wording to use, and I have a copy of that template of the application. And it's just a matter of submitting an online application. And don't wait till the last minute. This is a several month process in order to get this charity number approved. So that's the charity return. Now, one practice that used to be more common in the past was if a squadron had a donation, but they weren't registered to issue their own receipts. This is where they just would go to Richard at our office in Regina and say, well, I need a receipt for this donation. Well, this is where CRA is starting to frown upon that practice. Like they don't want us at the provincial level using our charity number to basically issue a receipt on behalf of a squadron who's not registered for a charity. That has happened in the past with other organizations, and that's where it has created issues. So this is where if you think you want the ability to issue charity receipts, I would encourage you to start the process of getting registered. Now, one warning, it normally takes 2 or 3 months to get this approved. With COVID, the charity department was one of the departments that CRA rated for staff to work on a lot of the COVID related programs. So things got even slower there. So it's best to get your application in as early as you can so that you'll get your charity number. It's hard to say when it'll be in place, but hopefully in place for September for the start of next year. So that's the charity number. Now, there is one benefit of getting a charity number. And this is our next form. It's a GST rebate form. This is where nonprofits and registered charities are allowed to get 50% of the GST back that they pay on purchases throughout the year. It's a form you have to complete every 6 months, and it can add up to a few dollars depending on the dollar amount. Like if you take your cadets on for an Easter trip, you could have possibly $500, $600, $700 of GST from that, and you can get half of that back as a rebate. Now, for the organizations that are not a charity based with CRA, this is where you have to have 80% of your funding coming from government sources, which most of our squadrons or all of them do not meet that requirement because we do rely heavily on fundraising from the general public. But if you have a charity number, you can automatically apply for your GST. Just the fact you have a charity number, you can apply for 50% of your GST back. So that's another form that you need to be aware of, especially if you're currently a registered charity. You should be looking at filing a GST rebate. And this is one form where if you forgot to apply for it, you can actually go back 4 years and apply for the GST rebate. And they will backdate it for those 4 years. So you can catch up.
Hi, Brian. I was just going to ask exactly that question, if it would go back a few years.
Yes, they go back. GST can go back 4 years to rebate ITC credits. And
Thank you.
even as something else, I don't know if this was just an exception they did. I know with 41, like one of the dilemmas, like 41 was we were incorporated, we had a charity number, but our charity, as an incorporated entity, we had our own business number assigned by CRA, but our charity number was actually a sub-account of National Air Cadets League charity number. So we actually had two different business numbers at the same time that we were using. That's something CRA doesn't like too much, and that's what caused a lot of this reorganization problems. This is where, as soon as we got our own charity number using our actual squadron business number, I was able to apply for the GST number, and I'm thinking, now they're not going to let us go back 4 years, or we technically never had a GST number, but they did. They allowed me to apply for 4 years of GST credits, and last spring we got an extra $3,000 from CRA for GST rebates for 4 years. So that could be a potential bonus for getting a charity number, is being able to apply for a GST number and going back 4 years. So again, that's where the first step to do that is you need to get incorporated if you're not incorporated already, or if you're struck off, you need to get re-registered, either by getting your financial statements up to date or setting up a new corporation. You then have to register for a charity number. And then once you get the charity number, then you can start applying for the GST rebates. So it is definitely a step-by-step process in order to get this all achieved. And this is where over the next month and over in January, I'm going to be contacting the squadrons that need to do some type of action. Whether the first step is I want to get all the squadrons incorporated. That's the first step. After that, it'll be up to the squadron to decide if you want to get a charity number or not. If you do, I'll work with you in getting the charity application sent in. And then finally, once the charity number is approved, yeah, I can show you how to do the GST rebate. So that's kind of the steps, part of the steps we need to do to get compliant with CRA fully across the province. Now, there are some other forms. You're probably wondering, I'm never going to stop with the forms here. This is probably why we have people who don't want to be treasurer in the squadrons because of the paperwork. But this is where, this is a good type of forms, getting you money. This is where one form that you really need to be careful about is Sask Lotteries grant. There's about 6 or 8 squadrons in the province that's grandfathered in to get a Sask Lotteries grant. This happened years ago. The grant is no longer available for new organizations. But the caveat, though, is if you don't get your paperwork in every year, you could lose the existing grant. And that's where they likely will not renew it once you lose the grant. So it's a simple, I believe it's just a one or 2 page form. And you just have to provide, okay, you were given this X number of dollars, how did you spend it? And
proof of invoices to spend it. Yeah,
yes.
It's a 1 page form.
And they were very flexible this year with COVID. I know 41's one of the squadrons that gets this grant, and they were a little bit lenient with the type of invoices we were allowed to submit. And like I know there's at least one other squadron on the call that I think this applies to. So yeah, it's important to make sure you get that application in every year. Another form is the LSA grant money. This is a grant that D&D provides during the year. And usually what they require is they're willing to reimburse the squadron for certain type of activities, mostly cadet activities, some admin related activities, rent. If you have to rent your facilities, they'll cover rent for your building. And this is where the key, though, is you as the treasurer, you need to get copies of the receipts to your CO, and then the CO will submit them to Winnipeg, to D&D for reimbursement. So again, this is free money that as long as you have the expenses, you can get them into D&D and they'll reimburse you for it up to the allocation that your squadron has. And the allocation is primarily based on your squadron size. The larger the squadron, the more dollars you could potentially get, as long as you have the expenditures. I know we just went through another round of LSA grant. The receipts were supposed to be in by November 30th. But the problem is they're only looking for receipts since April 1st, and the majority of the squadrons have been shut down for about 80% of that time frame. I know when we submitted our receipts, we had a lot of different receipts that we thought were eligible, and we found out they changed the eligibility rules compared to last summer, and basically they denied practically everything. Even our virtual training costs, like we subscribed to software and got set up with a virtual training classroom. That's not an eligible expense for D&D. So yeah, this is where it might be tougher to get LSA money because of the situation. Like I know 41, we're hardly spending any money at the moment. We're all virtual. Even when we could be open, we had to shut down for 2 or 3 weeks because one of our cadets, senior cadets who came in, got tested positive for COVID shortly after he was in helping out with the first year cadets. So we haven't had much opportunity to be in person. So, and this is where, again, you want to make sure you work with this, work with the CO to make sure that receipts for that LSA money is sent in. And the CO, if you're unsure what expenses are eligible, just talk to the CO. I know back in, I believe it was around September 20th, D&D sent out a memorandum that outlined what expenses they're willing to look at covering as part of the LSA money. So if you're unsure about it, just talk to your CO and he probably can forward you that memorandum to tell you exactly what expenses to watch out for. And there's also another expense that we didn't know about until last year. They're covering base phone charges. So that's something else you could talk to your CO about if they have the memorandum on that, is you can actually submit your telephone charges and they'll reimburse you for that.
All you need is the front page of it.
Yes.
They started out to say that they needed a copy of your bank statement to prove that you paid the bill. I know some squadrons, they just automatically have it come out of their bank account. And at the top of the bill, it states that the last bill was paid. So that's all you really have to submit.
Yes. So, so basically, I think I'm running out of forms to talk about here. Needless to say, yeah, there is a bit of responsibility when you're the treasurer. There is a few forms, but don't feel like you have to do this alone. If you have any questions, just reach out to Richard at the office or to me as well. Or if it's a question Richard can't answer, he'll email it to me to look at. But basically, we're here to help you out as much as we can, because we want to make sure you stay fully compliant with all the various organizations that we need to be compliant with, so that you don't run into potential problems. And it's a lot easier to stay compliant than falling behind and then try to play catch up afterwards. It's usually more of a headache doing that. Are there any questions before I move on to the next section?
Can you just talk, it's Leona, can you talk a little bit more about that base phone charge reimbursement piece? What would I need to start doing?
Well, usually that's where you just need to provide the receipts of your phone bills to your CO. I'm going to just see if I can quickly find the email for that.
Yeah, the couple of squadrons I'm affiliated with do is take the front page of their SaskTel bill and photocopy and send that in. You don't need all 2 or 3 pages. You just need the front bill where it says the total amount for the phone charges. At the top, it states the amount of the last month's bill, the amount paid, and the zero balance. So that's all you have to submit for each month. But you can only do it from April 1st of 2019 up to the present month for right now.
So April of 2020 or April, you said 2019?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because it's 20, yeah. Because their DND covers off from April 1st from their government financial year, which is April 1st right through till March 31st of 20. Okay, no. April 1st of 2020 of this year, sorry, 2020. Yes. Sorry, Leona.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just seeing if I can quickly find the article here.
Brian,
Yes,
you mentioned that the deadline for that LSA was November 30th. Are they lenient with that at all, or is that a pretty?
good. If you haven't submitted it, talk to your CO right away. Get them the receipts, and I might still be able to submit them.
This
Okay.
is just the initial one because the end of the year, CO has to send it in by the end of February, I believe.
I think she missed that deadline, the last deadline. So I'll just check with her and see if this one got sent in.
Yeah, no, that I find that D&D can be fussy about that. I know last year our CO kind of forgot to send them in by November 30th. And we did get some money, but we didn't get our full allocation. It wasn't until the spring, like this last spring, they started handing out extra money because of COVID. They actually used some of our receipts from before and gave us some LSA money at that time, in addition to the bonus LSA money they gave out to all the squadrons. So yeah, no, if you haven't sent them in, talk to the CO right away and get them to submit it. The worst that can happen is D&D says we're putting them on hold, but hopefully because of this whole COVID situation, hopefully they'll be understandable.
Thank you.
But don't quote me on that. I never, after how D&D basically butchered our last LSA submission, I'm not quite sure what they're doing. If they want to hand out money to the squadrons, they're not being too lenient. But I know in some provinces, some squadrons are having big issues with rent payments. So I don't know if they're trying to give them a bit more extra money to cover rent. I know in Saskatchewan, unfortunately, we don't have too many squadrons that have massive rent payments to make each year. Any other questions?
Are you going to talk at all about assessment and bonding reimbursement expenses?
Yes, the assessment. Or what would you like to know about assessment fees?
I remember attending a virtual meeting and that was talked about briefly, that was something squadrons might not know about to present that for reimbursement.
Okay, for LSA or?
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, well, that was in their September memo. They kind of denied league assessment fees as an allowable reimbursement under the LSA program now. So that, I know that's an expense that the provincial level usually bills out to each squadron based on the number of cadets. We'll charge so much per cadet based on the previous year's numbers. And then there's usually a bonding fee. I forget how much it is, but It's
$25.
what's that?
$25.
Yeah, it's a small amount and to help spread out the cost of the bonding insurance or bonding application. But I don't think that's reimbursable by the LSA money.
No. LSA initially started just to cover extra training costs, and then they've expanded to cover like telephone, office, certain office expenses. It doesn't cover food for activities or anything like that. So
Well, actually, they said they would cover that.
no, oh,
Like part of the expenses we had was like food costs associated with our FTX last year.
Mhm.
They said, well, you should have submitted this in last year's batch of this
Hmm.
of receipts. So it sounded like they were covering it. They just denied it because it was before April 1st. Yeah, no, I can't seem to find the email here about the phone. But if you're interested in, just send me an email about that. I'll try to find this. I'll try to find out. It was about a year ago that he sent it to me. I can try to forward it or talk to your CO. This was a memorandum that came from D&D to the officers. So your CO should have a copy of that.
Good, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions? Well, if not, I spent a lot of time talking about the ACC 9. So what I want to do is actually show you the new version of the ACC 9 form. It's very similar to the old version, so there's not too much difference. Just give me a minute to get it started here. Okay, can you see my screen?
yeah.
Okay, so the ACC 9 looks very similar to the previous years. They just tried to make it more functional and provide more value to it so that you could use it as a complete source to manage the finances of your squadron. When you go into it, the very first page, which is called Data Setup, this is where you would enter your initial information for the start of the year. You enter base information, such as your squadron's name, address, who the treasurer is, and so on. Best time to contact them. That's more for me if I have questions about your ACC 9. Talks about who the commanding officer is. Then the size of your squadron, number of cadets. Then over here, we start getting into the opening balances. And in most cases, this is where you could go to your last year's ACC 9 and start with that, or you could go back to your beginning bank statements for the year and get the balances from there. Right now, it's set up with 4 basic bank accounts, other cash in hand, your main checking, a canteen account, petty cash. There's room to create 7 more asset accounts if you wanted to. So you do have flexibility. If you have a lottery account or something like that, you can actually add more bank accounts here. Under liabilities, which hopefully you don't have too many of, one is a bank credit card. One of the big changes, I was able to convince National League to adopt a formal policy allowing squadrons to use credit cards. This is where before, it was actually in our policy, we were not allowed to use any kind of electronic payment cards, like debits or credit cards. But I was able to convince them that saying, well, we're in the modern age now. I know one of the headaches we had on the Easter trip was we had to, we were spending $10,000 to $15,000 on hotel rooms and meal costs and everything else for 1 week of travel. And this is where we thought it would be a lot safer with a credit card than giving a parent $10,000 in cash to pay for everything. And even then, hotel rooms, they want a credit card as secured. They want a credit card on file. And we didn't want to ask a parent saying, well, do you have a $10,000 credit card limit? If so, you can be the parent on this trip. So we were able to convince them to go with a credit card. There are conditions attached, like they want to have strict standards and operating procedures on how that card is used. They don't want you to use it just constantly. It should only be used only when necessary. But it is allowed. You need to select your reporting year, which for most everyone should be August 31st. You enter this first start of the year, and then it should automatically populate with the, like if you put 2020 in this box, in where it says select the reporting year, the blue box, it should automatically say 2021 in that white box beside it. Then again, from last year's forms, you just grab the information: total assets, retained earnings, surplus, current liability debts. That's where, when you get to the end, it could be off by a couple dollars because of how it handles fixed assets. That's where you just enter that adjustment here. For GST, that's where you can enter 5%, 6% PST, and you'll see where that comes into play. And then finally, if you have any outstanding checks or deposits that were part of last year's books, but never cleared your bank account until September, which is the following year, you would enter that on this screen. So that's the initial setup for your program.
I just have a quick question about checks and deposits that haven't cleared.
Yes.
So when you're doing the next year's books, do you still include that in your revenue and expense journals?
Or I know for myself, I always include like any checks I wrote, but they haven't cleared. I include them in the year that I wrote the check. So it'd be the previous year.
And then you don't put them in the next year. So because when you're reconciling your bank account, if they're not in those revenue and expense journals, how do you reconcile that?
Okay, what I know, this is the way I would handle it. In the previous year's forms, I would have it listed there as an expense. But that's where, when I do a bank reconciliation, if I go back up to the top here, like for main bank account balance, I wouldn't use the actual account balance on my bank statement because that doesn't include those outstanding checks. I would include my reconciled bank balance, which would be the current balance on my bank statement minus the outstanding checks.
Oh, okay.
And then when I go ahead and enter this year's transactions, I would just single out those checks that were from the previous year. I just won't enter them again because technically they're already accounted for in the reconciled bank balance from the previous year.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Last year it did add them in twice because I'm still learning how to use this stuff. So how do I fix it this year? Do I just put in like the actual bank account balance, even though it's not the same as the end of last year?
So what did you do last year?
I entered it on this page, like at the bottom there, and then I also included in the revenue and expense journals.
Okay, so you actually entered the bank balance as of August 31st, but you didn't account for the uncleared checks, though.
Well, I took this from the setup page. I took the numbers from last year, and those numbers had that accounted for. Like,
Okay.
yeah, and so it basically got added twice, I guess.
Yes, it kind of sounds like it did. Yeah, so yeah, this is where What you can do is when you're working on this year's ACC 9, when you get to that point, if it's not balancing, just give me a call or contact me and I can help step you through it. Or email me a copy of your ACC 9 and I can and along with some notes, like
Okay.
what were from the previous year actually, and we can see how we can adjust it.
Okay. I did send you an email. I didn't send anything. Did you get that email? I sent it a few days ago.
I probably did. I'm a bit behind on my emails. I've been starting to review ACC 9s and I probably just haven't got around to it yet.
Okay. Okay. I'll get back to you later on it then.
Yeah, this is a common problem. When basically how you enter transactions the previous year could have an impact on the next year. If you had to get a review or audit done, I would lay odds your accountant picked up on that and did the correction for you. But if you just did a compilation and you were under that 25,000 or you're not in corp, that's where, yeah, it's a common mistake, especially if someone else did it the year before. You might not know how they recorded it, and then you come along and that's where things aren't matching up properly.
Okay.
On the next couple of pages are the revenue and expense pages. This is where you start entering your information from your books. The first column is reconciled. This is where you would use this when you do the reconciliation. Basically, as you go through your bank statements and verify if you entered it, you'll just click off the reconciliation tab. And then it'll show up when we do the reconciliation report. Then there's a transaction type. And with the transaction type, that's where it's the most common: bank, credit card, direct deposit, e-transfer, petty cash. This is more for your reference. How did the money come into the bank account? You can enter a reference number. That's where it's up to you what kind of system you want to use. You can enter the date. Now, one thing I noticed with the date, you may have to play around with it. I'm going to just try one thing here. It says in the notes 0 day, month, year. This is where, as soon as I did that, it gave me a format saying wrong date format. That's because it's actually how the date is set up in your Windows system. That's the format you have to use. In my case, I actually have to enter it as year, month, and day. And then it works. And then it converts it into a day, month, year format. So just remember that when you're entering dates, enter it based on how you normally enter it in your Windows computer system. And this is a setting you can change within Windows. It's a Windows setting. So it's if it gives you an error message at first, just try entering it in a different format, like day, month, year, month, year, month, day, and whichever one works, stick with that method. Then you can enter the details, like any kind of description. You would say how much cash came in, and then you indicate what the account is. And for the account, there's a pull-down menu button. Oh, why is it not coming up here? There we go. And you can just select the account that you want to use. Basically, in this case, it's whatever account the money is being deposited into. Now, this is where okay, what? So this is where to try to minimize errors, because when you're working with spreadsheets, it's very common to get errors built in. This is where there's this proof of category allocation. With this amount coming in, you have to allocate it to one or more of the following columns. And the first columns are things like HST, GST, PST. So this is where if you happen to have to collect GST, I don't know of any squadrons that's actually required to collect GST, but it could happen. This is where you can indicate how much GST or PST you collected. It also talks about an issued tax receipt. Just kind of move over. So you can, so basically this is for charity receipts. And then over here, this is where you can start entering your various revenue items. And again, some of these you can create, you can modify them if you wanted to. So this is where you do have some flexibility. Like for example, this is from other service clubs or charities. And the reason we have this is this allows you to transfer the information directly to a 3010 formatted form, which you'll see at the end. So you can indicate which service clubs you received money from, just to keep track of it. Because that's part of the reporting requirement of the CRA charity return, is you have to list which charities you received money from, like the Legion, for example. Then you have other items, non-tax receipted donations, tax receipted donations, because again, you have to make a difference between the two. As part of a charity number, you do have to keep track of who you issue charity receipts to. Then over here, we have gaming and lotteries fundraising. So all the various fundraisers you do, you could have a separate column for each one to keep track of them. Then likewise on the expense, or one other thing I'll just mention. Right at the very end here. Yeah, here's a column for GST rebates, canteen proceeds. But there's another transfer between accounts. So whenever you transfer money between bank accounts, you would do two items. Whichever bank account was receiving the money, you would go ahead and enter like $1,000, and then you would indicate over here, transfer between accounts. Basically, it's not going to list it as an expense, but it's going to show it as a transfer to another bank account. Then on the expense side, you have to do another entry showing which bank account the money came out of. And again, you would have to indicate on the expense side where the money went to. So that's how the ACC9 handles bank transfers between two accounts. On the expense side, it's much the same format. This is just for expenses.
Do you need to, do you still have the option of choosing a single account system or a multiple account system with
Right.
this new?
What do you mean by that?
Like when we download the ACC9 from the league website, there's two options. You can either choose the single account or the multiple account ACC9. With the new system, is that still an option?
Like, is that you're talking about multiple bank accounts?
Yes.
Yeah, this is set up where it has the one default bank account initially, and you can add more bank accounts if you want to.
Okay, so do you treat petty cash as a separate account, or is it just account? Or
Actually, I'm just going to go to the data setup. This is where these are the accounts that are already created.
okay,
Other cash in hand, petty cash, main bank account, canteen. Like I'm just going to use 41 as an example. This is where other cash in hand could be money that the treasurer has in his possession. He just hasn't deposited it yet for whatever reason, or he's kind of keeping a petty cash. We usually give our officers a small amount of petty cash at the beginning of the year to cover postage. That could be the 1040 account. Our NCO club, they look after the canteen, so they have some cash in their cash box throughout the year. And then our main checking account And if you have multiple bank accounts, that's where you use 1050 to 1095 to add more bank accounts you can keep track of.
Okay,
Yeah, I would recommend keeping them separate. Then it makes it easier to reconcile afterwards.
yeah. So if you take out cash, then that's what you mean by having to use that transfer and enter
Yeah.
it twice.
Right. Say I gave our officers $300 to cover admin expenses throughout the year. I would just show a withdrawal on the expense side of things on their main bank account, and then I'll show it as being transferred out to another account. And then on the revenue side, I will show $300 coming in to pay the cash.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The
Okay.
instruction booklet that they've got on the website is full of this information too, and gives you examples of this too.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention, I'm going to be setting up a website where I'm going to have a link to like these recordings, and as well as the ACC 9 form, the updated version, as well as the manual that they published to go along with this new ACC 9 form. And then there might be some other resources I'll be adding on as well. But one of the other things the new ACC 9 guide does, it actually provides a bit of a background on accounting, just to kind of give you a familiarity why they're doing things in a certain way. So yeah, so going on, this is where if you have a parent meeting and you have a habit of saying, well, here's the income and expenses we incurred during this month, this is where you can just come to here, enter your dates, and keep in mind it has that same issue with the dates. You have to enter the date based on how your computer wants it entered, not how it's listed here. And then it'll actually pull out all your revenue and expenses for that period of time that you specified, whether it's 1 month or 2 months or 3 months of transactions. So this will help make it easier if you have to present a report at your parents' meeting. You can show them exactly what you spent the money on and where the money came from. These are some of the new features that they're trying to incorporate to make it more useful to run the financial affairs for a squadron.
Can you print those off at for a parent meeting?
Oh yes, yeah. Once you do it, then you can just you can print it off just by going to file and print.
Okay, good. Thank
Right now, if I go to file and print, it doesn't show me much because I don't have any transactions entered, but it will allow you to print off that report. Now, under here, this is a reconciliation report. You can reconcile every bank account that you have. The bank account, petty cash. Basically, what you need to do, like here's the main bank account. It's just like any reconciliation. You put down the date, like August 31st. You put down your account balance, and that's where you list all your outstanding deposits and checks on these 2 boxes to the left. It'll automatically transfer the total here, and it'll give you the actual reconciled bank balance after accounting for all uncleared checks and deposits. And this is your actual ending bank balance for the year. And you can do that for each of your bank accounts you have set up. And then this is just a summary, kind of a bird's eye view of all the reconciliations for every account. And hopefully you have green for everything, which means everything's all balanced. So that's, now one thing with this reconciliation, I know it's not really set up for a month by month. I guess you could do this for month by month, but you have to keep overriding the information. Instead of saying end of year, you would have to say like end of the month that you're doing. and make sure everything is being entered prior to that month. But then when you do come to the next month, you just have to overwrite everything. You may have to delete everything and start from scratch. This screen is definitely more set up for an end of year reconciliation. Now, some extra features they started throwing in, and there's actually a few, there were a few more features. I'm going to see if I can get permission to distribute those sheets. They're not in this version. They used to be in the previous version that they had a month ago. One of the tools is a budget tracker. This is where you can sit down with your CO and your chair for your squadron and basically come up with a budget for the next year. This is something that you don't do as on your own as treasurer, even though sometimes that's what happens. But ideally, you should be sitting down with at least the CO and hopefully the chair too, and basically working out a plan for next year. And that's where you can put an estimate of your budget, and then you can use it to track your budget versus actual as you start filling in the ACC9. So this is definitely a budget tool. And then you can print this out and give it to the CO every so often to show them the status. Technically, the CO is not allowed to handle any of the money, or any of the officers are not allowed. But usually they want to be involved in like the financial health of the squadron. So you do usually want to keep them involved. So this is one way if you have to make changes to your plans. Like this last year, I know at our squadron, we had to make major changes to our budget. We slashed basically all of our fundraisers, but after we slashed all our activity costs, turns out we're almost breaking even. So, but yeah, this is where it is a tool you can use to kind of set up your initial budget and then to monitor it. And at the end of the year, you can actually use this year's numbers as a starting point for next year's budget numbers. There's a section here for investments where if you have GICs, you can keep track of your GICs and the maturity date and so on. The D&D claim tracker, this is kind of like for LSA purposes, for keeping track of the LSA money, rather than panicking at the last minute trying to come up with receipts. This is where, as you incur them, you can make a note of them and keep them in a file. So when your CO needs them, you could just give him this report along with a copy of all the receipts, and you'll have his LSA report all ready to go. So again, it's not mandatory to use this form. It's just there as a tool you can use if you think you can find this useful. And then some squadrons, sometimes they want to track volunteer hours. Like they might have an unofficial policy that says, well, if your kids and cadets, you have to help out so many hours a year. The problem is we can't really enforce that if we wanted to, but it is something you can keep track of which parents are volunteering the most or how many hours. So it's a tool. Something like this, if you want something more detailed, you could probably set something up in a separate Excel spreadsheet that you create yourself. But for something basic, it's here. There were some other forms that they had in here. They had an expense claim form. So whenever a parent or an officer incurred expenses on behalf of the squadron, there was a form that they could fill out on the spreadsheet and print it off and submit it. That was a nice form. It basically allowed them, you could, on that form, you could track what the expense was and actually assign it to an expense category. Likewise, there was a deposit form where, again, you could fill it out. You can indicate what the deposit was for, like account number, to make it much more simpler when you do the data entry. So those are the forms I'm going to try to see if I can distribute as a separate standalone spreadsheet. So that's the data entry that you'll be doing throughout the year. At the end of the year, this is where we get to the actual ACC9 form. And this is the form that I need you to submit shortly after your year end. And that's everything in red here. So we start off the first page, it's just a cover page. The second page is just an identification. And that's where a lot of this information is going to be automatically filled in if you do it on that very first page. It's just going to bring this information into this form. Now, there may be some extra questions you need to fill out, like, is it a registered charity? If yes, what is your registration number? And have you submitted your last year's T3010 form? Again, just the tracking. Now, this is where in the next month, I'm going to be contacting squadrons and I'm going to be checking to see if you've got all your forms submitted and to the appropriate agencies. And if you don't, that's where I'll be giving a reminder saying which forms and still need to be completed. Because I know we occasionally get squadrons where 1 year's worth of returns didn't get sent in for whatever reason. Page number 2 is the revenues. Again, it's going to take all the information from your revenue sheet and it's going to bring it over here and sort it by categories, assuming that you use the proper account numbers or the proper columns.
Brian, while you're there on there, I forgot to mention under the fundraising, they should have one column listed for the PC car raffle income. I encourage them to have a separate one for the PC 50/50 share that they are going to get back. Keep it separate so you know what's what.
Yeah, that's where there's 2 areas for fundraising. There's games and lotteries fundraising. This is probably where you could put the car raffle and the 50/50. These are provincial, like shared provincial squadron activities, but they are licensed activities. Right now, you have the flexibility of putting whatever names you want, but the car raffle and online 50/50 are usually 2 categories that we have every year. And then you can have other fundraisers where all your miscellaneous fundraising activities can go under here. Yeah, you've got room for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 9, 18 different fundraising activities. So that's probably should be ample for most squadrons. I know if you ran 18 fundraisers, you're probably going to have a bunch of burnt out parents that won't want to come back the next year. But this is where you have the flexibility to do that. Under expenses, again, it's just going to take how you sorted them on that expense page. It's going to automatically total them up for you on this page. So there shouldn't be any work for you to do here. And then at the bottom, it gives your total expense, total revenue from the previous page, and then it tells you what your surplus or deficit is for the year. This is where it's getting easy. Most of the work is already done. The balance sheet, this is where it's automatically going to calculate your current year balances based on all your transactions. This is where we can start noticing discrepancies. Like if it says here your main bank account is $10,000, but you look on your bank statement and it says it's $13,000, well, you have a $3,000 discrepancy. I know the first question I would ask myself, have I accounted for outstanding checks? Because maybe the reason why it's $10,000 is there's a check for $1,000 and a second check for $2,000 that haven't cleared the bank account yet. So again, that's where you just need to account for that. So this $10,000 balance here may be actually the correct balance. Don't use the $13,000 from your bank statement. That's not your reconciled bank amount. Now, when it comes to assets, this is where things may get done differently, especially if you get an accountant to do a review or audit. That's because they're required to basically do everything on an accrual basis and provide values for our assets, like purchase price, minus depreciation. This is where the Air Cadet League, they just recognize assets as a straight cash cost, and they want you to enter a value of $1. So this is where, when we get to the bottom difference, if it's only like off by $3 or $4 difference, there's a good chance it's because of this, where you provided with a nominal value of $1, unless you actually do an adjusting entry, which the instruction manual actually gives some examples of how to do that if you have to. Liabilities, there shouldn't be too much you need to do there. And then this is where hopefully your difference should be 0, hopefully. That means everything is in balance and you probably got everything entered properly. Or if not, you made enough errors where one error offset the other error and it still ended up balanced. But yeah, normally if it's green, you're in good shape. Now, I've seen some where they submit an ACC 9 and this difference was like negative $20,000. Well, that means there's a mistake somewhere. And that's where we have to go back and try to find out where did the mistake come from or what was not included. That's where I'll be giving you a phone call then and asking you a lot more questions. Now, the final page is just a listing of all your fixed assets. Now, this page isn't used directly in the financial statements for the ACC 9, but rather this is more just for your reference, especially for insurance purposes, because this is where, as a squadron, and actually as a treasurer, you're responsible for maintaining an inventory of the squadron's assets. Now, this doesn't include all the D&D supplied equipment. That belongs to D&D, or the National Defense. That's their responsibility. But any equipment that the squadron buys with its money, this is where you need to be responsible for that. And that will typically mean buying an insurance package to cover the loss of those items if something ever happened. Like I know we've had a couple squadrons that has had insurance issues where they had lost equipment or stolen equipment. And they found out afterwards their insurance policy never covered it, or worse yet, they forgot to pay their insurance bill and technically they had no insurance at the time and they got the claim denied. So you do want to make sure that you stay on top of the insurance. Because some squadrons, they could have a substantial amount of money tied up in equipment and field equipment and sporting equipment, computers. And this is where you just want to provide descriptions. If it's like, say, computer equipment that has a serial number, you'll want to record the serial number of that item in case anything should happen. So essentially, this is just more for your reference and to keep an itemized list of what you have. And this is where, don't assume that you're not going to have a theft. I know even at, like, we parade out of the armory last, I guess it was somewhere around March, the armory was broken into. And we actually lost all our air rifles. They all got stolen, along with the reserves lost a few of their training rifles. So this is where even in a secured building, we can have cases where equipment can get stolen. Now, in our case, it was all D&D equipment, so it didn't affect us directly, but it could have easily been our computers, for example, that could have got stolen. So again, you just want to make sure you're protected. That's where, if you don't have insurance, you just may want to talk to your local insurance broker and just discuss the options. And this is going to be one of the things they're going to ask for, is a list of your equipment. So we finally get to the last pages, and this is where, if you are a charity, you can't use this as your actual return for CRA. They have an online application, but this gives you all the numbers that you need to fill out that form. It's basically the 3010 format. It gives you the totals. This is why it's important to categorize your revenue and expenses properly, because it will lump in certain accounts to come up with a total here. It tells you which of the ACC 9 accounts are being used for each line. And then it should just be a case of taking this information and transferring it to the 3010 form. Now, there's more information required, like the 3010 form will ask for a list of all your directors, their names and addresses, and it'll ask for some other questions. But at least you'll have all your financial numbers ready to go. There's a form here to keep track of your GST, if you can apply for the GST rebate. Now, in this case, it's based on quarter, but with the GST rebate, you apply every 6 months. So you just take whichever 2 quarters you're applying for and just get the numbers from it. At the end of the year, this is where it'll tell you your end of year balances, and this will help you out. These will be the same numbers that you would use as your beginning of year balances on the next ACC 9 form that you complete. And then finally, there's a budget here. This is where it's going to bring in the numbers from the current year, and that's going to be your starting point. Then you can just come in here and make whatever changes you need to make. So that's a quick summary of the ACC 9 form. Now,
Nice thing is this form is a lot bigger, so it's easier to read and easier to fill in.
Yeah, no, they definitely tried to make this form more easier to use and more valuable to a squadron. Basically, that was their main goal, was to give squadrons a tool that they could use to manage their financial affairs.
Is the goal to eliminate the professional accountant services?
No, if you're incorporated, which hopefully all squadrons will be by the time next training year starts, and if you're over $25,000 in sales, you still need a professional accountant to do the review or audit for corporations branch. So you'll still need that. But this is where you probably would still give them this ACC 9, completed ACC 9 as your starting point. And then they can do what they need to do the review. Yeah, keep in mind, when you get a review or when you get an audit done, basically the primary purpose of the accountant is to verify that the numbers you're putting down on that paper are reasonable, and they're looking for cases of fraud, making sure there's no fraudulent activities going on. That's especially in the case of an audit. Typically with a review, they're just making sure that the numbers look reasonable and with no alarm bells raising. With an audit, they go one step further and actually they try to look for fraudulent activities, or they're more active in looking for fraudulent activities. So that's where they might start asking more information, like how is the money handled? Who collects the money, and what's the chain of possession from the time you collect the money to the time it's deposited into the bank account. That's why an audit is usually much more money than a review, just because there's a lot more questions being asked. But this is something that you could do initially. Basically, you don't have to be an accountant to do the bookkeeping portion and to prepare the ACC 9. It just, like I said, if you need a review done for a corporations branch, that's where you need to get a CPA accountant to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, before we wrap up tonight's meeting, I just have a couple questions for you then. I'm planning to probably do this on a monthly basis for the next 2 or 3 months, especially as we go through some of these changes and such. And this is where, if you have any specific topics that you're interested in learning more about, just drop me a note, or send a note to Richard, just saying like what specific financial topics you're interested in learning about. Like, for example, yesterday, one of the topics was talking about charity donation receipts, how and when, what you need to do to issue them. So I'm going to do a presentation on that in the near future. So if you have any particular topics you're interested in, just feel free to send me a note with the request, and I'll do my best to incorporate it.
Brian,
Yes.
you have one more form to talk about.
Oh, the affiliation agreement.
Yeah.
I was just about to get to that
Oh, okay.
because I realized I forgot to talk about one form. You probably don't want to hear about another form. I lost track of how many forms I've talked about so far. But this is going to be done as part of the ACC 9 form, or to be completed with the ACC 9. We're going to be actually about exactly a year ago, the Provincial League, we signed an affiliation agreement with the National League, which is basically laying down the ground rules of how we operate in conjunction with the National Air Cadet League. And that's where the way it works is the National Air Cadet League sets most of the rules. We basically operate under those rules at the provincial level, and now we have to basically sign an affiliation agreement with each squadron. And there's nothing new about this agreement. It's something that's you've been unofficially operating under for a while. It basically says you agree to operate under the policy and procedures of the National Air Cadet League and whatever additional procedures that the Provincial League might have. So it's nothing new. It's something they want formalized. The Air Cadet League just signed a memorandum of understanding with D&D at the national level. That dictates on what basically we do on the civilian side, and then it just filters down. National has its responsibilities. Provincially, we have our responsibilities, and then at the squadron level, you'll have your own responsibilities. Now, the only thing new about this agreement, and actually, if you've been around, you may have seen a copy of it. I've sent it out at the last couple of AGM meetings. This is where one of the requirements is you need to get incorporated. So that's something I'll be assisting with the squadrons that need help there. Yeah, on the call here, I think everyone's incorporated already, so you should be okay. And then the other part of it is there's an information sheet that talks about who is the members of your executive, what's their names and contact emails and phone numbers. We want that for our information purposes, just so that one of the issues we had this summer, we had a summer student to try to collect this information. And after all summer trying to get this information, she could only come into contact with half the squadrons. So what we're trying to do is put together a contact list so when things come up that's important to get out, let all the squadrons know, so that we can actually reach someone and they can do whatever they need to do. And a good example is LSA money. This last summer, there was a June 30th deadline. They basically said, we've got extra LSA money here. You need to get receipts in by June 30th. And from what I gathered, there were squadrons that never submitted anything. And that's where we tried our best to communicate with squadrons, but we had a few squadrons that were just unresponsive. We didn't know if they were just physically shut down and were ignoring their emails or what. And this is where they could have missed out on some LSA money. Because if you didn't apply, then your share of the money could have went to another squadron. or another group of squadrons. So with this times of COVID, this is where we're probably going to be operating virtually for a few more months. This is where it's going to be important that we can communicate with all the squadrons. Now, I'm hoping over the next few weeks, you're going to get a call from your friendly director who's assigned to your squadron. Like 34, do you know who your new director is? It's Leslie Bennett, I believe, was just assigned to 34. So you probably should be hearing from her soon. Basically, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be asking for some of these contact information. And we're hoping our directors is going to be our front line to try to get some of this information from the squadrons. So I know we had a directors meeting a week ago, last Tuesday, and everyone who was there at least got their marching orders to contact each of their squadrons and start collecting this information for us. So we're hoping to start gathering this over the next few weeks, and this is where, again, another item is, if your squadron has any kind of difficulty at all, whether it's financial or any other issues, don't be afraid to reach out to the executive. This is where you can contact Richard at the Sask Air Cadet office. Or if it's financially related, you could also contact me or send an email to both of us. Just put both of us on the email, and between the two of us, we'll be able to respond. Or if it's an issue, we can bring it up to the executive. We've been having some issues with other squadrons that we've been having to address. And fortunately, a lot of our squadrons are in good financial shape at the moment going into COVID. But we definitely recognize that, yeah, there's basically hardly any fundraising allowed. Especially cadets and officers are not allowed to go near fundraising. They got strict orders for that. And this is where this could create some hardships for some squadrons. So this is where, if you're experiencing issues or you're about to experience them, reach out to us so we can come up with a solution before it becomes a major issue, a major problem. Hopefully we can fix it right away. One example is assessment fees. We sent out assessment fees last May. Richard hasn't told me lately what percentage are still outstanding, but that's something we're willing to work with squadrons. If you can't afford your assessment fees from last May, just contact us and we'll work something out. Basically, we're going to be flexible that way because we recognize, again, that with no fundraising, it's going to be tough to come up with money this year. That's why we came out with the online 50-50. We're about, actually, Larry, has that actually launched yet? Or are they about?
Haven't checked. I was going to check today and haven't got to, but it should be checked starting this week sometime, Richard said.
It might be tomorrow that it starts.
Yeah. Wednesday, yeah, probably.
We have an online 50-50. We ran a couple versions of it already. One was partnered with the Wounded Warriors in the summer. We just did one with where we helped promote the Saskatchewan Aviation Museum in Saskatoon. Both of them, I think it raised about, I think we sold about $1,200 or so worth of tickets.
Yep.
This next one is going to be more for the benefit of squadrons and the provincial committee. So right now we're working on a formula. We're trying to see how the best way we can identify which squadrons participate in the promotion of the 50-50. I haven't seen the new form, but supposedly there's a place where the buyer can indicate which squadron or area they're from. And we're going to be sharing the proceeds with the individual squadrons. All that we ask is you help promote it. It's like encourage your parents to post it on their Facebook. Don't get the cadets to post it on their Facebook. That might get us into trouble. Because we do have Big Brother watching over us. D&D, they actually monitor all our Facebook and social media presence. And every so often, we hear about it. I forget, what was the last time? Oh yeah, Squadron was going to have a casino night. And we heard about that one at the provincial level, thinking, well, how can a squadron be gambling? That doesn't quite meet our criteria. So they do monitor what we put on the Facebook. So I would encourage, don't just post it under the parents. Get the parents to share it. And then likewise with the car raffle tickets, the car raffle deadline, the draw is going to be end of February. So I believe Richard's asking for the tickets to be returned by middle of February. This is going to be a challenge. I'm not going to deny that. Like I know at 41, we have like 100 families, but it's kind of hard to get tickets out when you can't meet the families in person. And now with this COVID issues, we could be facing more restrictions. It could be hard to face-to-face. So how do you get the tickets out there and collect the money back? So that is going to be a challenge, but we ask that you kind of do the best you can at your squadron level. We have had some squadrons, like I believe CAMSAC, they've been selling a pile of tickets, and they even asked for a second batch of tickets. So they have been quite active.
And there is information coming out where you can just get people to go online and get a hold of Richard and buy the tickets there, and your squadron get the credit.
Yes. So yeah, I don't think Richard has sent the email out yet.
Not yet.
At least I haven't seen it yet. And there's also, you have the ability, you could take orders online as well. Like, we're not going to have an online form, but you can have people phone in, request to buy tickets. And I believe all you got to do is just fill out the ticket for them, and they can pay, they can deposit the money like by e-transfer directly to the squadron, and you just have to email them a copy of the ticket and the ticket number.
Or directly into your bank account, and then you
Oh,
pay
yeah,
for the ticket.
That's why they pay for the ticket directly
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
But you have to get them a copy of the ticket somehow. So, but I believe that's all going to be in Richard's email, those different options. Now, I think that's the last I have. I can't think of anything else.
No, you got her covered.
Any final questions? So, Tara, you going to come back for a third time?
If you'd only supply coffee and donuts, would it be okay, wouldn't it?
I got to admit, for the community meetings last week, supplying supper, but I was going to eat it.
Yeah, you only one got to eat it, yeah.
I had late suppers, and I didn't get home until 5 minutes before the meeting started, and my wife was kind of getting annoyed at me, saying I better eat my supper after she cooked it.
So thanks, guys, for coming out and hopefully absorb some of this. And like Brian said, the manual is a good manual. Plus, there's going to be these videos on the website to go through and refresh, or there's more of these that are coming up that you come back and join in too. So
I'll be emailing a link to our webpage. I'll be creating that sometime this week, and I'll email that out to everybody. And it'll be kind of a one-stop resource, like for the various materials and the spreadsheets. What else? I thought I just remembered. Oh yeah, just a reminder to keep in mind on what's it, January 4th and 5th.
Yep.
Okay. We're having another round of community meetings. We've been trying to host a series of community meetings on the first Monday and Tuesday of every month. And that's assuming that the first Monday is in the same month as the first Tuesday. Like this in December, November 30th was the Monday and the first Tuesday was the first. So we just had it 1 week later. So they were back-to-back meetings, Monday and Tuesday. So for the rest of the spring, yeah, we'll be having these monthly meetings. Just again, trying to keep current with squadrons and try to.
And see, we can't have the area meetings in January like we usually do, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Gary Goering, our new chairperson for the provincial level, is going to be doing. Whether he's going to have a more formal meeting, like the zone meeting, or but anytime there's change, they'll be getting the information out. So that's why it's important to monitor your emails, and I encourage you to use your Sask Air Cadet Gmail accounts, because that's we definitely send information out to those email addresses for sure. Any final questions? I don't need to share anymore.
Most of the meetings we put on are through Google Drive. And that's what we use. Brian has got his Zoom account set up with his company, so you can go longer, and that's why this one is a Zoom. But all the rest ones are usually through Google.
I gotta figure out why my Zoom is
not zooming.
It seems like every time I have an Air Cadet meeting, my Zoom crashes. That seems to be the common theme. Because I literally been on Zoom literally from 9 o'clock right until 6:45 for different meetings and conferences. As soon as I started up the Air Cadet meeting, within 5 minutes it crashed.
Well, did good.
Yeah, so yeah, in most cases, at least the meetings I have, they typically will be Zoom, just because it gives me a few extra options, like especially it makes it easier sharing screens and a few other administrative features. And it also allows me to record it much nicer compared to Google Meets. The community meetings, that's where Gary prefers using the Google Meets for that.
And all the invitations will come out on your Google skacl.ca email. So where they come to, unless you've specifically asked to get it changed.
Yeah, if there is a different email address, just please type it in the chat box and I'll make a note of it. And the next time I'll include that as part of the invitation too.
Are those invitations only sent out to the chair people? I haven't seen anything about those at all.
Well, I sent it out to the chair, secretaries, treasurers, and vice chairs. But
yeah, I got those ones.
Pardon?
But not. I got the one that you sent out for this meeting, like for these meetings, but I haven't gotten any from, like, for the community meetings.
No, that just goes to the chair for some reason or other, and he's supposed to get it out to the rest of his executive, or his or her executive.
That's why it's important. If there's any any of the SKACL email address to use, you should at least use, someone should be monitoring the chair address, because I know most of the executive will use that one for sure. But I know about half the squadrons don't actively use those email addresses.
I use the secretary one, and our chair uses the chair one, but I don't know how often she checks it.
Because one of the other options you can do is, even if you don't want to use it on a regular basis and always log into it, you can always go into it once. And this is where you can forward the email to your regular email account that you do use. That's what I do. Like the 41 chair email address, I just have it forwarded to my personal email account. So I don't need to log into it. I can't remember the last time I logged into it, but I get all the emails forwarded to me automatically. So that's something you can do to make your life easier. or that the other members of your executive can do. And it only takes, as long as you remember your user email and your password, it only takes about a minute or two to go into the settings and forward the email account.
There's the email. You just click on that and in your Google thing and go in and turn on automatic forwarding. You see on the screen?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Any final questions? Well, if
No.
not,
This was great. Thanks.
oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can call it a night here. And like I said, if you have any topics that you would like covered, just email them to me and I'll do my best to incorporate them into these presentations. Probably going forward, my sessions are probably going to be talking about one or two specific topics and then just having a question and answer section after that. So I'll be looking at doing something in January and probably something in February and March as well.
Everybody good? I click end.
Okay.
Have a Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yep, Merry Christmas. And like I said, if you're working on your ACC 9s and you have questions, feel free to email me. I'm not going anywhere this Christmas. I'm going to be locked in the back of my office, working away. I might take Christmas Day off, but my wife would kill me if I had the nerve to come into the office and work on Christmas Day. I'll just make
Thank
sure.
you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Talk to you in a few days, Brian.
Okay, sounds good.
You look good. Okay. Good night. I guess they all left now, eh?
Yeah, it's the two of them.
Okay. Yeah, no, it went good again tonight. Too bad you couldn't got a few more. That was all.
Well, actually, it was better than overall. It was better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
the
So,
community meetings, the way they've been kind of poor turnouts,
oh, that's for darn sure.
even going to be worse.
Yeah. No, good. So you take care. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. Good night.